Well, ladies and gentlemen, it seems that hot girl summer is nearly over and autumn has blessed us with pumpkin stuff, and Halloween's coming soon. And also there's like two really big movies coming out about clowns. So it's welcome to clown season. So in honor of clown season, here's the first of two big movies coming out this year featuring a clown, It, Chapter 2.
Hello.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be reviewing It, Chapter 2, the follow-up to Andy Muschietti's... Muschietti? I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm not going to pretend like I can. The second half of this large, epic adaptation of Stephen King's It. Yeah, I know that in 1990, someone was able to figure out how to adapt this 1,400-page book into a 4-hour TV miniseries, but it's 2019, and we have over 5 hours of material now adapting this story, and this is the second half, the part with the grown-ups. So, let's get right into it. The first chapter of It was wildly successful, and I think it owes a lot of that success to the fact that they didn't advertise it as being the first part of a series. They just called it It, and then as you're watching the movie, if you're familiar with the story at all, you're like, oh, they're just going to be, this is just the kids' half. We're not going to see them as adults at all. Cool. And the first It is pretty good. I like it. I rewatched it a few days ago before watching it Chapter 2 to get, like, you know, some sense of continuity. It's a strong movie in the sense that it's entertaining and that they were able to take a huge chunk of this book and sort of reappropriate it into a way that would be something that people would want to see, right? They moved Derry, Maine from the 50s to the 80s. They even casted a kid from Stranger Things to really run home that nostalgia. And in many ways, they sanded down elements of the narrative that made it a little pricklier and stuff to make it a little bit more straightforward, I feel like, a little more palatable for mainstream audiences, and it worked. It's a fun movie. It's entertaining. It's memeable, which is good these days. My main issue with the first It is revisiting it recently. I realized that the way the film ends and the general shift in tone from the way the actual book does sort of the nonlinear back and forth between the stuff, there's a sense within the movie that, like, it's actually pretty satisfying as is. Like, when It Chapter 1 is over, before it gets to the whole thing, it shows the title with Chapter 1, like, ooh, we're gonna keep going. The movie just kind of, like, it works fine. It works as its own thing. Like, you don't ever have to see them come back to fight It. You don't ever have to see them grown up or any of that stuff. They take away so much of the relationship between the child period and the adult period and the idea of memories and flashbacks and, like, trauma and stuff, that if you're just watching a movie with the kids and them coming together and becoming friends and, like, this fucked up town, them killing an evil clown at the end is, like, good. You can shut it off right there, and that's a satisfying movie. You don't actually need to follow up with the rest of the book. That's kind of how I felt watching it. So going into It Chapter 2, I had, like, zero actual interest in this movie. I know just last week I was talking about how I'm going to try to only review things that I'm really passionate about and not do things just because I think you guys want to watch it. But in this case, I kind of felt like I would be an asshole if I skipped, like, literally the only big movie coming out this month. But I went into It Chapter 2, like, just kind of not caring. I mean, I was looking forward to it in the sense that I like all the actors they cast as the adult version of the Losers Club, and I wanted to see what they would do. But in terms of the movie itself, I was just like, whatever, I'll watch this and then I'll talk about it. But I'm not excited. I didn't feel any kind of anything for it. You know, I was not like, we didn't need this movie, in my opinion. I know this is like a minority opinion, but I felt like we didn't even need Chapter 2, personally. So, going into it with literally zero investment, I ended up quite enjoying the film. That's the big spoiler right there, is I really enjoyed the movie, and I think it's better than I was expecting. Maybe going in with low expectations helps make the movie seem really good, so if you end up seeing it after this video and you hate it, then I'm sorry. We're going to start with, like, things I don't like, because I think that's just kind of quicker and easier. The biggest problem with It Chapter 2 is the film's length. It is nearly 3 hours long. It's even longer than Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and it doesn't, like, absolutely need to be. There's a thing about long movies where sometimes you just think if you cut a movie down to be shorter, that would make the movie a better movie. And in some cases, cutting a long movie down to being a short one is actually bad, only because that can make the movie feel even longer. You can have a movie that's like 2 hours and 10 minutes, but if it's like just jam-packed with stuff, and there's not really space to breathe between character beats, then that movie can feel even longer than it really is. So in some cases, a movie does need to be 2 hours and 20, 2 hours and 30 minutes or whatever, and especially since that's, like, kind of the modern paradigm, is like everyone writes in this weird version of the 3-act structure that requires 40 more minutes than any of us want. I don't know. So I kind of get that, but it doesn't, to me, feel like something that needed to be as long as it is to let things breathe. It seems as though it needed to be a kind of long movie, and then for narrative symmetry, it ends up being even longer. One of the big things that happens in the movie, I'm not going to talk too much about the plot or spoil things, but mainly because the book it's based on is really old, and it would be weird if, like, you should know what happens in it. There's a chunk in the middle of it, Chapter 2, oddly, that reminded me of Avengers Endgame, where I felt like a huge third of the movie was going to be devoted to, like, a quest to get some stuff together to do the thing. And I understand why certain movies are structured in that way, but when you have, like, a relatively large cast, but, like, making the decision to have all of the characters in your movie need to go get a thing that's going to help do another thing later to, like, end up beating the evil clown is fine. But if that thing requires, like, flashbacks, that's a bad idea. Basically, obviously, the plot of It, Chapter 2, is that the entire Losers Club has to come home to Derry, Maine. They've all grown up and become different people. The Pennywise is back. He's killing people and eating children and stuff, and they vowed to stop him. Now they got to stop him. It's straightforward. But along the way, they end up having to go through the town and reclaim some, like, lost memories, because as you leave Derry, your memories of all the fucked up parts about Derry disappear. So they have to, like, get these things back. But the basic structure that they use for this is that all the characters kind of split up. One of the characters wanders around. They have a flashback to when they were kids, so it's an easy way to bring the kids back and have a bit of the self-reflexive relationship between adulthood and childhood that the book has. And then there's, like, a scare sequence within the child flashback related to, like, the totem thing that they're getting. And then it cuts back to present day, and then, like, the scare sequence, like, continues, like, but different slightly. But there's, like, a bunch of kids in this story, and they are all grown up now. There's a bunch of characters, so you have to watch that basic structure thing play out repeatedly, and it's not very interesting. There are a few characters in the story who are served very well by these flashbacks. They're really well written, and they're done in a way that really gets at their character arc in a useful way. So it's, like, entertaining for the scares, but then it's also, like, character development and useful and thematically gripping and stuff. It's good, right? But every one of the characters does not get a sequence like that. Like, some of them get one because the other characters got one. And when you get to those sequences, they last longer than... Maybe they're not really as long as they feel. I was, like, checking my watch and stuff, but, like, I wanted to. I don't own a watch. But those sequences, when laid end to end, have these really big dead spaces, because you're like, Ben's sequence is, like, okay, but then, like, Eddie's isn't, like, there's this sense of, like, did we need this sequence? Like, did we need to see this entire rigmarole from each of the characters? Not really. Especially considering how fucking long the movie is. So, that stuff is very frustrating for me. The fact that they had to spend so much of the runtime on that device, and then I would have at least, I think, preferred if that device had been executed better. Like, if the stuff within those sequences was better, it would be cool. Because, like, there's actually a scene later in the movie, unrelated to the sequence in the film, where Richie, it was the kid from Stranger Things, the first movie, now it's Bill Hader, who's fantastic in this movie. Like, oh my god, he's so good. Bill Hader is, like, yelling at, like, one of its, like, projections about how he knows all of his tricks now. And it's supposed to just be, like, a funny throwaway line, but to me it really highlighted the problem I had with the first It, which is just that It in the book, I feel like there's so many dimensions to, like, how he is scary, how he's, like, thematically scary, like what he represents is scary, how the actual clown itself, just, like, at face value, is scary. Some of the sequences are scary. Like, there's so much to it. It's like everything around Pennywise is horrifying. In the miniseries, I feel like Tim Curry's performance as Pennywise was, like, so good that, like, you didn't have to do a bunch of crazy stuff with him for him to be scary. But in the first It, because they have so much more money and it's, like, modern days, they do so many things with Skarsgård as It, where he's, like, CGI stretched out, like a fucking cartoon and stuff, and they have all these weird-looking monsters. It's like the type of stuff that Guillermo del Toro would just, like, fucking nut over, but, like, for me, I was just like, okay, it's, like, a really big, tall monster lady with, like, long titties, I guess that's scary. And the things that you see are so extravagant, and there's so much of it, there's so many tricks and little, they're all very repetitive, that they're not scary so much as they are, like, just shocking. It's just, like, they just keep the movie... The first It functions in a way where it is constantly just setting you up for jump scares. Like, it's, like, literally one trick done 100 times. I guess to me, there is a difference in horror between actually scaring an audience, actually getting at deeper fears rooted in the human psychology and stuff, and really affecting them versus just having shit pop out all the time. I hate that device. I hate how it works. And I hate that when you're watching a movie, you're just like lulled into like, okay, all right, and there's the music is rising, and we're gonna get, and then I think, hey, jump scare, and it's just like, I don't like that feeling. I don't want to go to a movie for 2+ hours and just get anxiety that stuff's just gonna pop up. That's not scary to me. That's just like, oh cool, a thing popped up. And It Chapter 2 improves upon this in the sense that the movie spends a really good chunk of time on dealing with the psychology of the characters and what they've been through and what they mean to each other and their character relationships. But there is still, in those sequences, it's those same repeated tricks of like, oh no, he's a clown, but now he's a really tall clown. Oh no, he's a clown, but now he has spider legs. Oh no, he's a clown, but there's a monster behind him. Oh, there's a big statue and it's moving. It's just like, it's so extravagant and so like ornately arranged that it stops being scary. It just like, I felt really dispassionate about them. I would watch these scenes and think, that's a cool set piece, I guess. Oh, that's cool. That looks neat. That's well realized. But I didn't feel anything. I wasn't actually scared. I was annoyed that I almost dropped my water multiple times. You know what I mean? Like, not actually like scared. So, there, a lot of things in this movie that are meant to be like really great horror movie things to me just don't actually work. They feel kind of hollow, and I'm not into a lot of the scares. Like, I wish they just spent more time letting Pennywise, just the idea of Pennywise being scary, the look of Pennywise being scary, and not needing to add just so many layers of like visual shit that it doesn't work for me, I guess. Which brings me to the things that I did like about the movie. I liked the cast. I loved the cast. I loved the cast in the first one. I loved the kids. I thought that was like one of the best, like most well cast groups of children in like a movie in like forever, like a very, very long time. And somehow they outdid themselves by getting together a group of adult actors who each of them like actually really feels like the child grown up, like in a real way. A lot of times you watch a movie and someone plays a young version of an older person, and you have to do some of the legwork the viewer has to sense that this is like one person from two different ends. And in it, they do a fantastic job. Everyone around. The actors, the writing, like just like the lighting and like the makeup and shit. Not that anyone uses any like effects makeup, but I mean, you know, like little minor things to make people's like face. Like it's really good. They're really good. Bill Hader as grown-up Richie is like obviously steals the whole show, but everyone is really good. Jessica Chastain's fantastic as Beverly. I'm forgetting his name right now, but the guy from the Florida Project who plays grown-up Eddie is also really, really, really good. I love that guy. He's like so talented. I love him so much I forgot his name. And who else is also... the guy from the Old Spice commercials, Isaiah Mustafa, is pretty good as Ben. Like, he's a little bit much at times. Like, his character, he's a little bit too like amateur actor thing where you're like really intense, so you're like shaking and like repeating words and stuff. Like, he's a little bit of that. But he's still good. He's just not as good as everybody else, I guess. The hot Australian guy who plays grown-up Ben is like better than I expected because I've never seen him in anything before, but I liked it. They all work so well together, and like they have like comedic chemistry, and then they have like some of them have like palpable romantic chemistry, and then they all have this like just sense of like friendship, like that feeling when you're an adult and you haven't seen your friends for a long time, but you still feel all the stuff from the childhood. Like that type of thing is really hard to capture in a movie, and normally it's in a movie that's like a fake version of The Big Chill. You know, like every few years, like a bunch of young people try to make their version of The Big Chill, and it always sucks, and it's always like this is not The Big Chill at all. And I like that housed within this larger, big, ambitious horror adaptation, they do that so much better than every movie that tries to be The Big Chill. Like, it's almost incidental because there's so much focus on like the mechanics of the quest to beat Pennywise, and there's so much focus on like the visual look of all the CG horror shit that I think maybe people overlook just how good the drama parts are with just the characters. To the point that, like, if this was just a movie about a bunch of friends that meet up because one of their friends died, I would like it, like, 1,000,000 times more. Like, if you just took out the evil clown and all the other stuff, this would be, like, maybe my favorite movie of the year. Like, I really like it. But it's not that. It's 3 hours, so a lot of it is all the horror stuff. And I don't think there's the best balance, really, I guess. I guess I sort of would have been happier with more stuff with just the losers as grown-ups. Like, even if I had to spend more time with them before they come back to Derry, like that would be really bad from a screenwriting perspective because it's like it's wasteful. But I would be happier with that if the movie was 3 hours long because of that. If it was 3 hours long because they wanted to give us as much of a picture of how much they changed and grown before they came back together, I would respect that more than I do having to see like this repeated fetch quest thing of just, oh yeah, remember when I stood next to this bench and then this happened? Oh, it's happening again now, but I'm an adult. Like, it just, even though some of those sequences, like I said, are really good looking, I was still just like, oh, this is, 3 more characters have to do this? 3 more of them? Oh my fucking god. Because the way horror works, you can't do, like, quick horror. You have to set the stage for each of these set pieces. You have to, like, build suspense to get to the big jump scare. But that's annoying for that long. I don't think horror is meant to be sustained for nearly 3 hours. Certain genres work in the 3 hour, like an epic gangster movie or something. Or, like, I'll sit and watch, like, Once Upon a Time in America, like the Leone film. Like, that's, like, because it kind of ebbs and flows and rises throughout, like, the really long runtime. But if it was that long, but it was just, a thing popped up. Oh, a thing popped up, and it's got, like, gross cobweb titties or whatever. Like, I'd just be like, okay, you're just like, I don't need this. The other thing, too, is, like, I feel like if you're going to have a movie that's this long, 2 movies that are this long, then you should find a way as a writer for the space for all of the more granular, interesting details of the book. Like, you should find more stuff that speaks to the themes. Like, I don't like... In It Chapter 1, there's a bit where Henry Bowers is, like, fucking picking on Ben, the fat kid, and stuff, and, like, being really shitty and trying to cut in his belly. Really, all the Ben stuff in both movies really gets to me. It's like it really cuts to the core of Fat Kid Dom. But in that scene, there's, like, the thing where the neighboring dairy people are driving by, and they ignore it. And there's, like, a red balloon in the backseat to kind of imply, like, oh, yeah, this is, like, Pennywise's influence. And, like, in the book, obviously, King sort of intends Pennywise to be a bit of a metaphor for, like, all these different things that are wrong with the town, but he is not meant to be the actual, like, cause of everything wrong in the town. Like, Pennywise, like, eats children, and he, like, scares people and shit, but, like, Pennywise isn't responsible for, like, racism or, like, homophobia, And, like, those things are in some of that is definitely more present here, especially the homophobia element, because, like, the big, like, really gross hate crime that happens at the beginning of the movie, and, like, some of the stuff with one of the characters. I guess I probably shouldn't spoil that. I feel like that's probably a bit new for people. But that stuff here in Chapter 2 doesn't actually connect to the stuff from the first movie. Like, it doesn't feel like they're of a piece. Like, I sort of assumed that the reason this movie was going to be longer was that It Chapter 1 was very successful and did a very good thing, and they didn't expect it to be such a huge hit. And then once it was a huge hit, Warner Brothers just let them do whatever the fuck they wanted, and then they just got too indulgent. That's actually what I went into the movie anticipating happening. I thought, oh, well, they got, like, more money, and they just kind of, like, fucked around and, like, did whatever they wanted. But that's not really it. It is more like they made the first movie one way because they weren't sure if they were ever going to get a sequel, and they successfully made an adaptation of the first half of it feel like its own satisfying movie, which is cool. But they sacrificed a lot of things to make it special. So here in the second movie, they're trying to shove that stuff back in to, like, make up for it being missing from the first movie, and it kind of affects this movie and it makes it not as good as it could be. I almost sort of wish that they had just made one movie, just one It, and then it just really expanded the structure of this movie, where all the flashbacks were the things that happened in the first movie. You know what I mean? Like, where, like, the main story was them as adults, and then it kind of flashed back to the stuff as kids, and not, like, here they're flashing back to stuff as kids that all feels like cut scenes. They all feel like deleted scenes from the first movie. They all feel completely extraneous. If they were cutting back to stuff from they were kids that was actually the really meaty good stuff from the first movie, you would have, like, one super good movie that would probably be, like, 3.5 hours long, which is crazy. I know, not a good idea to release theatrically for financial reasons, but I think that would be, like, the ideal version of this movie. Because the first one, like I said, is really good, and it's exciting and fun on its own, but it just feels kind of hollow. And then this one feels more rich and feels stronger in terms of the actual characters and the way it deals with the themes, but it's kind of scattered and too long and bloated. So somewhere maybe you could recut the 2 movies together and make, like, one It epic, and they probably will, but they're probably not going to do it the way that I'm saying. They're probably just going to lay them end to end and make them really fucking long. That's going to suck. But yeah, those are my thoughts on It Chapter 2. I thought it was a really fun movie. I liked it. Love the cast. If you're hesitant to see it, I mean, no one's gonna make you spend 3 hours watching this movie. But if you do, there's so much to enjoy. They really do a good job of interjecting comedy in a way that's like useful and helpful in getting through the runtime. And the stuff with the characters, like the actual Losers kids, is all really, really good stuff. It's some of my favorite stuff this year. Some really great performances, and I just kind of wish I didn't have to sit through so much horror that did nothing for me to get to it. Basically, not a great horror movie in my opinion, but a really pretty good movie overall. That's it for this week. I'll be back next week with a new video reviewing something else. If you like this movie, if you've seen it, you can put it in the comments below. If you hated it, let me know why. Your thoughts on Stephen King adaptations in general, things you would have wanted from this. If you want to talk about Dark Tower stuff, that's cool too. Remember that movie? That fucking sucked. Those books are good. Man, yeah. So yeah, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. If you have already subscribed, please hit the little bell icon so you get notified when I put out new videos. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. I hope you didn't hate it, but if you did, it's okay. And you can click on any of the other videos here that you see if you want to watch other stuff I've done. That would be really cool. I'm trying to get to 500 subs by the end of the year, so if you have any friends that like watching like nerd people talk about movies on YouTube, you should tell them about me. That would be neat. If you're ashamed to tell everyone about us and about our relationship together where you sit and you watch me do this, I'd understand that too.